So, resisting Hegel. One already hears the double bind around which we will revolve, around which, such is the claim, Hegel will incessantly revolve. For resisting Hegel means at once and simultaneously, indiscriminately and inseparably, resistance in Hegel and resistance to Hegel. Resistance in Hegel invokes that towards which the speculative resists, and thereby, through the work of the negative, the labor of mediation, through incessantly resisting that which resists, occurs the deployment by which what resists can only do so by also not resisting, by releasing its resistance. That is, by elevating its resistance to the point where it is comprehended, appropriated, and reappropriated as resistance, and therefore reaches its recognized truth, testifying that its resistance is always and already the essence of its own release, its own non-resisting affirmation. In this sense, resistance to Hegel, that is the negativity proper to this phrase, will always and already mean the appropriation and reappropriation of this negativity, and thus only see within this negative a resistance in Hegel. But perhaps one may also hear resistance to Hegel invoking that which the speculative deploys not in itself or for itself, but through itself without itself. Perhaps one could hear the negative here in resistance to Hegel performing otherwise than according to the movement Hegel had deployed for it. Perhaps one may hear in the negative of this phrase, resistance to Hegel, a without, which would force the speculative in itself out of itself, as if the speculative in itself would exhaust itself with itself out of itself, and thus would begin thinking beside itself, performing otherwise and thinking other performatives, projecting thus the speculative into what it is, as well as into what it has never been, never imagined it could be, operating both as its own resistance without this resistance converting itself into its own. As if through its own work, the speculative would show itself to itself as unfathomable, unrecognizable, irreappropriable to itself, as if the force of spirit was at once and simultaneously greater and no greater than its manifestation, and that its presence would also be the dispensation, the propagation, the dissemination of the night. When Hegel speaks of the night, at the time he is composing the project for the Real Philosophie in 1805, it is because he perceives it in the gaze of man. I quote, "This night that we perceive when we stare in the eyes of men, then we gaze upon a night which becomes frightful. Here befalls upon us the night of the world." He perceives the night in the gaze of man, for this night, this nocturnal void, is man himself. I quote, "Man, this night, this empty and hollow nothingness." I close the quote. This first and immediate figure of man figures the absence, the emptiness of all figures, the obscurity which deploys itself without showing or manifesting anything, consuming all in its deployment, leaving nothing of itself, no trace, no mark, no sign. It is, writes Hegel, a, I quote, "play without essence, that is an absence so powerfully inessential that it proliferates without law, except perhaps this law, obscure and tenebrous, to deport the totality of meaning in an emptiness devoid of all ground, and to occult the totality of essence in the abyss of a signifier without signified. For this play does not yet work, it does not yet project for itself an horizon, that is as such, if one can say of this void that it is as such, it only presents the frightening and terrifying scene of an interminable eclipse, darkening at once the world and the gaze of man in indistinction and indifferentiation. Analyzed as abstract subjectivity, this absolute night signifies consciousness as it interiorizes and conserves the multiple images and impressions it receives without inscribing them in a temporality of history and of representation, letting them thus surge and disappear in indetermination, vertiginously aconscious, says Hegel. Here a bloody head, here a white figure. I close the quote. As if this consciousness was but the passive receptacle of a deployment of forms which destroy themselves as soon as they appear. In truth, this night is consciousness which leaves itself behind, errs and loses itself in the immediate vacuity of an indirection without return. But this night, we ought not leave it to itself, but rather traverse it, penetrate it, descend into it. That is also contemplated by already appropriating within it the instant where philosophy will awaken from it and open its eye on the dawn of a discourse which will have always and already grasped by the very assumption of their enunciation each and every figure of its beyond, each and every form of its obscurity, and all the resources of its otherness. For into this night, philosophy cannot not penetrate, cannot not decide to throw itself and expose itself to it, to see in the opacity of its darkness glisten a direction, gleam an orientation, and shine the unique star. I quote, "The decision to philosophize throws itself purely into thought. It throws itself as in an ocean without shores. All the glimmering colors, all the support points have disappeared. All the other reassuring lights have extinguished themselves in the night of the world. Its only movement is that of confronting itself and plunging within that which is the most singular and the most other for itself. It is here that shines the unique star, the star of spirit. This star is the polar star." I close the quote. This gaze into the night, in the gaze of man, this necessary and inevitable step into the night for the philosopher is not without recalling another gaze, the one which does not shy away from death, the one which refuses to close its eyes to the negative, and by looking straight at the negative in the face and tarrying with it, deploys the life of spirit. I quote, "the magical power that converts," I close the quote, "the night, death, the negative, into being." As Hegel wrote these words, of course, the phenomenology of spirit was behind him. The process of absolute knowledge recognizing itself as the deployment of the comprehension and recognition of the totality of meaning as truth was accomplished. These worlds are thus informed by the entirety of this reconciled and reconciling movement, which began with the immediate sense certainty of difference and culminated in the absolute speculative identity of spirit. This culmination, this reconciled and reconciling absolute speculative identity is not, however, a simple crowning concept paving the way to the system of philosophy, signified by the threefold development of the logic, the philosophy of nature, and the philosophy of spirit. It is more, for Hegel, the recognition of identity always giving itself in differentiation, and of difference already giving itself through its identified comprehension. It is the recognition of what Hegel also called life. When Hegel marks the idea of life, as in the very end of the Science of Logic, most particularly in the third section where Hegel reveals the syllogism of the absolute spirit and the determination of the idea of life, he always marks it in a double determination. Hegel points out that life is grasped as both the complete form of this syllogism and as a particular moment in and within this very syllogism. As we know, the first and thus most immediate determination of the absolute concept is defined as life. The second determination is knowledge, the idea of truth and the idea of the good. And the third, that is the absolute in and for itself, the determination in which spirit recognizes itself, reappropriates and grasps itself in its infinity, is once more termed as life. In this sense, in this syllogism, life appears as the most immediate form of the absolute concept, its most formal, natural, abstract determination, and at the end point of the syllogism, precisely where the absolute recognizes itself as concept and as absolute totality by comprehending itself as infinite truth. Hegel determines once again the entire movement of this syllogism as life, as absolute life, as unperishable and unalienable life. I quote, "Only the absolute idea is being," writes Hegel, "unperishable and unalienable life, truth comprehending itself as absolute life." Which urges the following question. From one determination of life to the other, from the beginning point of the syllogism to its completion, does life itself have here or there its proper and ownmost meaning? Or in other words, is life to be thought as the immediate determination of the concept or as its absolute reappropriation? For Hegel, there ought here not to be any indecision. Life does not have either here or there, in one or the other, its singular meaning. Rather, life is to be thought of as both immediate and absolute, as the part and the whole. More precisely, life for Hegel produces itself as the infinite movement of its reappropriation, the infinite return of itself to itself before any particular singular meaning of itself. In this sense, thus, nothing will ever precede the return from life to life, and everything will happen as if the absolute concept, and since the absolute concept is that which recognizes itself as itself, is both and simultaneously the affirmation of its natural immediate determination and the Aufhebung of this immediate form, the suppression and conservation of its immediacy as absolute life. In truth, thus, it is always life which speaks of itself. This double movement of incessant identification and differentiation as donation of spirit or life is always that which we must grasp in order to deploy what Hegel entitled the speculative, which means, strictly speaking, that is, speculatively thinking, the infinite always and already gives itself and thereby works, traverses, inhabits the finite, whereby the finite always recognizes that it is given, worked, traversed, and inhabited by the infinite. For Hegel, this donation of spirit bears the name of history, and consequently history is always the manifestation of spirit's donation. Hence the question, what is at work in this donation? It is the process of naming history as spirit, and thus naming both history and spirit as the deployment of the already and always reconciliatory movement of signification each singular event in history already displays. For naming means, as our opening quotation hints at, albeit negatively, signifying the process of a reconciliation where singularity is always the gift of speculative meaning. This is why Hegel's phenomenology of spirit does not only present or depict the history of spirit or spirit as history, it phrases history and spirit, phrases differentiation and identification, phrases thus their correlation, which marks their reciprocity. And the consequence is double. On the one hand, it claims that the further history descends in the abyss of evil, the more powerful the Aufhebung of spirit as history is, the more forceful is the affirmation of absolute meaning, assured and validated. And on the other hand, it marks that in the process of this speculative dialectic, thinking does not forget or simply move on from the particular and singular historical moments of spirit's manifestation, but rather that it remembers and recalls how and in which manner these particular and singular historical events are comprehended within the deployment of an essence, whose comprehension marks how these events are what they are, as always engaging the expression of their reconciliatory actuality. The quote from the Phenomenology of Spirit thus symbolizes the modality of this recognition, the inherent and immanent law to which the entire movement of the Absolute remains subjected to. It symbolizes this law as a self-recognition of spirit and history as an incessant sacrifice. To go to the limit of this claim, we ought to say that the history of spirit is that of its infinite sacrifice. Hegel indeed refers constantly to the necessity of sacrifice as the inherent modality, immanent necessity and signification of history as spirit, whereby each moment in this development, from Greek tragedy to the Golgotha, to the French Terror following the Revolution, each and every singular moment in the development of history symbolizes the necessary sacrifice spirit operates on itself and through which is revealed its presence. And no one event, no one moment can restrain or restrict, throw it out of sync, or disjoin this movement of signified essence. History as spirit is the theater of a sacrifice incessantly offering the rhythm, the cadence, the pulse, where meaning occurs and through which the possibility of naming is given. This is why Hegel warns in our quote that the force of spirit is not to close its eyes on the negative, but by the long and sustained gaze in the face of nothingness, transform, transpose, alter, and transfer it, ultimately negate it and relieve it into its own end, which is its own truth, that is, until it reflects that it was already and always a name, amongst others, of the infinite life of spirit.
I specify this point in order to demonstrate the inherent necessity for Hegel to think the movement of a negation which retains and reappropriates the truth of that which it negates. Such is the speculative definition of sacrifice: to retain whilst negating, to keep the actuality of that which is abandoned, to preserve the essence of that which is annihilated. The question for Hegel is, what is being retained? What is this actuality which is being preserved? What is this essence which is being kept in the incessant process of its sacrificial negation? The answer is the actuality of violence. What remains, what is kept, what is preserved, is the incessant and actual sacrificial violence of spirit. For this sacrificial violence organizes spirit itself. That is, it consecrates the essence of spirit, which means that without this sacrificial violence, there would not be spirit. And the thesis could not be more radical, not simply because the violence of sacrifice reveals spirit, but also because this sacrificial violence preserves spirit, and thus we from the worst, preserves our we from what Hegel called the terror, the indistinct void where all singular individualities are engulfed in the pure negation of an absolute substance, so indifferent that it voids all identification. We know how Hegel analyzes this substantial void in the subsection called Absolute Freedom and the Terror. In this subsection, although negation wishes to realize itself, it encounters a moment which is not a moment. That is, it encounters a rupture where everything is put into question, where law, faith, state, the world above, the world of the past, everything sinks effortlessly, without work or being worked, into nothingness. It is not that we have stepped out of history, but rather that history is here represented as a void in the process of its realization and determination. Hegel, in the face of this void, mobilizes, as always, the economical violence of sacrifice, as if to signify that there always needs to be a violence in order to circumscribe the void. And thus spirit deploys itself as the violence of sacrifice, as this process of the negation and the negation of the negation in order to preserve us, and itself thus from the purest violence, that is, in order to keep us from falling into the barbarity of a pure night without essence, an unhistorical deployment of brute forces where indistinction remains the only law, a law void of indetermination thus, whereas eroded the very history of spirit. In this sense, spirit always expresses itself as the necessity of a violence which sacrifices the singularity of the other, the singularity of the self, in the name of neither the self nor the other, but of that which allows for the place in which both the self and the other recognize and reconcile each other, which means that this negation of the other is for the other. This negation of the self is for the self, that is, for the others and the self's future, and for what in the future can come between both other and self. To want to close one's eyes on this violence would be to befall into a state of worst violence, a state where, without this economy of sacrificial violence, we would befall into a night where no self and no other could or would subsist. This state of worst violence, this absolute night where no self and no other could or would subsist, means for Hegel that we would be engulfed in a sacrifice so forceful, so powerful, so magnified that it would sacrifice spirit itself. We would befall into an absolute sacrifice without economy, but which would entirely, completely, absolutely consume the totality of meaning in its sacrificial violence. All happens thus in such a manner that the economical sacrificial violence protects us from a sacrifice so powerful, so magnanimous, so pure and radical, that it would, by simply effacing, negating, destroying all and the totality of that which is. The economical process of sacrifice, in this manner, protects us from being entrapped in a sacrifice which would be so absolute that it would not even bear its name, and would reduce to ashes the very name of spirit. This sacrifice, without regard for the economy of sacrificial violence, Hegel does typify it in the first moment of the natural religion. This moment marks the luminous essence, where spirit is but its own concept, and where this ownmost concept engulfs everything and anything in its very exposition. This concept of spirit is, for Hegel, the deployment of its most abstract indetermination. That is, it remains simply in itself and uniquely closed in on its ownmost essence. It is fully and entirely identified with itself without regard for any mediation. It is, writes Hegel, a pure night, engulfing everything which is. So obscure, this pure night, that it shows itself also and immediately as pure light. What is capital in Hegel's demonstration is that at the very opening of the section on religion, and thus after the accomplishment of the ethical sphere, that sphere which grasps the inherent necessity to circumscribe the pure violence of the night in order for the self and the other to recognize themselves in the community, we are witnessing the scene of a pure sacrifice which gives nothing except annihilation, and which is identified with spirit itself, in that it leaves nothing outside its annihilating annihilation. That is, in a certain sense, we are witnessing the release of a sacrifice so absolute that it consumes spirit, along with the very possibility of its historical deployment. Of course, as we have marked it, this is an abstract, empty form or concept of spirit. However, the question which will emerge from this essenceless form of spirit risks of projecting the entire modality of spirit as history elsewhere and otherwise than in its own most affirmation or expression. Be it as it may, in this break which reveals the innermost secret of spirit, claims Hegel, spirit refers and reports to itself according to a simple relation, that is, a relation without mediation or determination. Being is thus radically and unfathomably undetermined. It appears as such purely, immediately, and thus appears as pure light, where nothing appears, except the blinding luminosity of appearance, that is, the complete and sheer, unadulterated and unwavering light of the sun. This first figure of the natural religion figures thus the voiding of all figuration. It remains faithful to itself, that is, sustains itself only as a purely visible and thus radically invisible sun. Ultimately, this first figure is that of a light that shows itself without showing anything and thus consumes everything in its presence. This first figure is thus a light which incinerates everything and anything present. As it portrays itself as an endless play of light, it is, says Hegel, a holocaust, which never determines, nor even seeks to determine itself. Hegel typifies this sacrifice as a pure consummation, consuming all and leveling all, that is, in the vacuity of a destructive indifference. I quote, "The movement of its own externalization, its creations in the unresisting element of its otherness, are torrents of light," writes Hegel. Pure and essenceless play without limits. The question here, however, is not so much what is retained, but how can spirit ever find itself, that is, determine itself within this figure without figure? How is this holocaust constricted so as to determine itself and take on a stable subsistence whereby something could be retained from its all-burning release? For Hegel, it is, however, always the same law. The sacrifice of spirit, this sacrifice so radically indifferent that it engulfs spirit itself, the very economy of a sacrificial violence cannot be left to itself. It must thus become its contrary. I quote, "However, this reeling, unconstrained life must determine itself as being for self and endow its vanishing shape with an enduring subsistence. The immediate being in which it stands in antithesis to its consciousness is itself the negative power which dissolves its distinctions. It is thus in truth the self, and spirit therefore passes on to know itself in the form of the self. The pure light disperses its unitary nature into an infinity of forms and offers up itself as a sacrifice to being for self, so that from its subsistence the individual may take an enduring existence for itself." I close the quotation. For Hegel, thus, the all-burning holocaust must determine itself. It must, because this law is also its own most inherent commandment. Here lies the decision for the implacable work of sacrifice, of spirit as the economy of sacrificial violence as history. To be that which it is, the all-burning Holocaust must then become its other, its contrary. It must retain itself, guard itself from itself, and thus know to extinguish itself, bind itself, stricture, and therefore restrict itself. Ultimately, it must not be left to itself, and thus keep, retain, preserve its own truth, or its own nameable truth, as an economy of sacrifice, and thus it must decide for its own essence, or its own recognizable essence, as violence, and furthermore, as the necessity of violence to the deployment of meaning in history. The pure and unadulterated sacrifice, this pure, indistinct void of all burning indifference, this Holocaust, must therefore reappropriate itself within an economy of sacrifice, and therefore sacrifice itself, that is, ultimately re-engage the movement of an economy of sacrificial violence in and as history. Here, however, one can regard two inseparable processes: the all-burning sacrifice as burning everything, spirit itself, and the all-burning sacrifice as extinguishing itself, as all-burning and appropriating itself in the economy of a sacrificial violence as history. In this sense, we would be called to rephrase this inherent necessity in a double bind, that of a Holocaust which burns everything, including itself, leaving no other trace of itself, a sacrifice so present, so devastating as absolute expenditure and occurring before it is constricted to an economy of speculative thought capable of naming it as such, and that of a Holocaust which, to be what it is, to hold a name for itself, would extinguish itself as all-burning and present itself, that is, also sacrifice itself, within the economy of a sacrificial violence. Such is the risk opened by Hegel, that of a double bind so powerfully aporetic that it risks of projecting speculative dialectic towards an impossible decision between sacrificing itself absolutely and plunging into the abyss of a pure void, or recognizing itself as and in the economy of a sacrifice capable of guarding and maintaining itself as and in history. The risk would then be something like an impossible decision between a pure night, so indistinguishable from a pure day, and where no meaning could ever differentiate between night and day, and a night circumscribed to the day, and where the economy of night and day would mark the very cadence of history. Such is the risk opened by Hegel, but such is also perhaps Hegel's gift, that of an undecidable risk, a radical and unassumable indecision between a sacrifice that will consume itself by voiding, incinerating, destroying spirit itself, and a sacrifice which would always operate in the name of spirit, which assumes, recognizes, acquiesces itself as an economical sacrifice, between a pure sacrifice without ground and the perpetually reiterated sacrificial violence of spirit as ground of history. This indecision between the all-burning sacrifice opening to an otherwise than speculative thought and the all-burning as distinguishing itself and therefore as an essential moment in and within the deployment of speculative thought, this indecision, no one could philosophically determine whether or not Hegel did or did not think it. It remains a remainder of the history of spirit that cannot be entirely reappropriated by and within that very history, a remainder which at once suspends and assures the deployment of spirit. I would be tempted here to call this remainder the gift of a justice without sacrifice. Perhaps this is what remains to be thought with Hegel, out of Hegel, and which marks at once a resistance to Hegel in Hegel. The gift of a justice without sacrifice, that is, a justice which remains radically undecided as to the truth of sacrifice. For what this justice without sacrifice retracts from is the achievement and therefore the success of sacrifice. In this manner, it is oriented, this indecision, by another call than that of truth and of sacrifice. Perhaps it also remains oriented by another call than that of donation. For this justice, not solely concerned with the accomplishing truth of sacrifice, would open to another possibility, that of interrupting the truth of sacrifice from realizing itself, accomplishing itself, completing itself. For what this justice knows is that the accomplishment of sacrifice is always and already the impossibility of justice. And therefore, this justice works not towards sacrifice, but towards the keeping and safekeeping of the secret of the other, that which cannot be given over to presence, but remains always and already heterogeneous to presence. Better yet, remains always the dispensation in presence of the other of presence. Thank you very much.